Goldsmith. This is another clip from my Comedian podcast in which I'm speaking to Nick Mohammed, who was first introduced to me as Mr. Swallow, a glorious comedy creation who's extremely silly but has a rigorous technical backbone. We're going to talk to him about his rigorous technical backbone, as well as how much of Nick there is in the character of Mr. Swallow. You don't want to miss this. He's a lovely man and it's very, very funny.
We started, by the way, just so you know.
Okay, that's all right.
I like a sort of a smooth way in, and then every so often my guest goes, "Oh God, we started."
I changed my voice.
I cannot eat a banana without going, "What is this?" Because of you. You have done that magical thing, which is to add value to my life, and sort of add
value to a fruit.
Add vocabulary, add words. Like you've created things which live on in other people's lives.
Is that true?
Absolutely right. Okay. Absolutely right. Yeah. And let's start off talking about Mr. Swallow and then maybe work backwards, because I've got loads of stuff to ask you.
Okay.
And the first question I want to ask you is, I know you just finished the Soho run of what is now called Dracula the Musical.
Yeah, just because Mr. Swallow the Musical, I think from an Edinburgh point of view, it's kind of fine because I sort of had like a bit of a following, or at least people who were kind of aware who Mr. Swallow was in Edinburgh, but in London, maybe not. And I think because it's quite a long run and we just needed to set it out because it's an expensive show, that it was just like, everyone's heard of Dracula.
Yeah.
Anyone who's heard of Dracula can come and see the show.
It's an idiot doing Dracula.
Yeah. I have heard stories of people who didn't know that it was a kind of a character doing a version of Dracula, which is sort of people who genuinely thought they were
who came to see it.
A serious version of either Dracula or a serious version of Dracula the musical.
Oh my God. And how did you
they didn't like
heard of that after? They didn't like it.
I did hear about it afterwards from people who did really like it, but who'd said that their friends had come and had really not liked it.
This man is mocking the great work.
They just thought it was a mistake.
Oh God,
that's all right. I don't think that was the majority of the audience. But,
no, sure,
but a small handful.
How was the run? Did you enjoy the run? Did it feel like a good fit doing it in London compared to Edinburgh? I suppose Edinburgh is very buzzy and festival.
Yeah, it was. It was 6 months after Edinburgh, so it was a good kind of enough time to kind of completely forget the music,
the songs,
the dancing, and all of that kind of stuff. But it felt good, and we were there for 4 or so weeks, and so it was more shows than Edinburgh actually. So it did feel. It was. I won't deny. It was knackering because I'd never done a run apart from Edinburgh. And the thing is with Edinburgh, you kind of go to Edinburgh, and pretty much on the whole, you only have to really do your show, and everyone's sort of there just to do their show, and that's kind of fine because everyone's just talking about their show, and it's just one thing you need to worry about, and you're kind of away from home, and so you can slightly, not that you relax necessarily in Edinburgh, but it's quite specific.
You can put off answering an email.
Because it's Edinburgh, and you've got the excuse of Edinburgh and all that kind of jazz, and everyone's up there doing sort of the same thing, whereas in London everyone else is doing all their normal kind of industry job, but I was still doing kind of castings and writing and things like that, so which is nice obviously to be doing that, and I was trying to do as much in the day, but then the show wasn't on until 9 o'clock as well, which is sort of later than I've usually gone on in the past, but which was quite fun in a way because it made the audiences quite bit boardier than normal.
I remember we were emailing to set this up, and I remember being not exactly aghast, but I kind of raised my eyebrows to go, oh, you sent me an email on the lines of, well, I've just got the show in the evening, so I'm spending all my days writing, and I was thinking, I'd have thought I'd be spending all my days lying on a couch.
The thing is, I set out trying to do so much, and it's the same with Edinburgh. I always think, Edinburgh in the day, once the show's running, I'll write a new script, and I never do. But I did do quite a lot this time around, but it just meant, and just general kind of London living was just sort of kind of, you kind of still do all the normal things that you would do if you're living in London. Whereas in Edinburgh, you don't. You make allowances for the fact that you've got the show. Whereas in London, it just sort of felt like, well, everyone else is sort of just getting on with it, so you've got to kind of get on with it as well. But it was really fun, really fun.
It felt to me that Dracula the Musical, Mr. Swallow the Musical, was the best Mr. Swallow show so far. Did you feel that?
I think arguably, yeah. I think so. Because it's certainly the one that's attracted the most attention and the one that's played to the largest number of people. And so I suppose... But I feel that I had to do the kind of journey to get... I think if I'd have opened... If my Edinburgh debut had been Mr. Swallow the Musical, I would have been very proud of it in many ways. But I think I had to get to that point with the character because I mean, the last few Edinburghs have all been Mr. Swallow hours anyway, but then it was obviously a big leap to then go quite big and involve a cast. And, you know, I never even properly even considered the idea of writing dialogue for Mr. Swallow, because when would that ever come about? Because it's very much a one-sided conversation with the audience, and, you know, there might have been audience interaction in some of them, but obviously it's a world away from scripting dialogue and casting those people, and then also then putting it in the context of a all singing, all dancing musical as well. So you could do, I suddenly realised that, well, actually, I can have fun with this character in lots of different ways, because there's so many different people to talk to, because I can be in character as Mr. Swallow, but then I can be in character as Dracula, and then even at some parts of the show, I could be in character as Mr. Swallow, as Dracula, and then as him doing someone else as well, because he's taken on another part in the show. And then he can talk to, in all those different characters, the real audience, the kind of pretend audience, and the other cast, and you know, they're sometimes in character as their Dracula parts, and sometimes not, because of the nature of the show. It sort of drops the fourth wall all the time. So I just suddenly thought, oh well, I can now really free myself up. Whereas before I've been, oh well, it's like a COD lecture, and I've got my PowerPoint, and there's the audience, and I really enjoyed doing those shows, and I would, you know, there was something very rewarding about doing those solo shows, and they always had quite fiddly but big endings, like in a kind of, you know, magic-y kind of way, and I always liked that. I really liked that. And the musical sort of didn't really have that, but obviously it was different. It was big in a different way, and it did have some magic-y bits in it, I suppose.
I think a principle of the Mr. Swallow show is that you bite off more than you can chew. As a creator, and the character then has to. No. I mean,
but I know what you mean.
You set yourself some ludicrous Herculean task, like and I'm aware, I know it's a magic trick, but like the memory feat that you did at the end of one, because I've seen several of the hours. And you do something which is kind of seemingly noodling nonsense that doesn't go anywhere, as this person flails around doing a fun thing, with a variety of stuff, and then it builds up to some sort of thing where people are going, oh wow, he's actually done a thing. And what I loved about Dracula was that I knew you were doing Mr. Swallow the musical, and someone said, oh, it's a musical of Dracula. I was like, you know, is that going to be pre-recorded? I know you've done lots of video editing stuff, things like that. And when I got in there and saw a set of Dracula the musical and went, oh my God, he's actually going to do this, and then you actually do it.
Did you see it in Edinburgh?
Yes, I did. I saw it in Edinburgh. When you first come in with bat wings on roller skates, your cloak around the feeling in the room was this incredibly joyous atmosphere. You must have felt that on stage. People going, "Oh my God, he's actually going to do it!"
It was quite nice. It was quite nice. Weirdly, a lot of the previous shows, I'd always the show was created with an end point in mind, as in so I thought, okay, I want to be able to memorize a deck of cards, or at least look like I've got an amazing memory, so I want to do that. And then the other one is I want to look as if I can do mental arithmetic, and so whatever it takes, whether I learn that or whether I kind of use some theatricality to kind of achieve that, I just thought, well, that's the end point. The end point's got to be this big sort of, in the end of Darren Brown shows, always and this happened and this and you missed this and this and actually this. I love all that. I love all that, and that had always been okay. Well, I'll roughly kind of create this lecture around that subject matter, but really it's just a platform for Mr. Swallow to talk nonsense for 45 minutes and then kind of end the show. But with Dracula or Mr. Swallow the musical, it was actually the start that was. It was always the first image. So the image of me entering as Mr. Swallow, dressed as Dracula on roller skates, and bearing in mind no one knew that it was even meant to be about Dracula.
Yes,
so you were told. So that was a deliberate point of not calling the show in Edinburgh Dracula the musical, because I really wanted to cling on to the notion that I want that image. I want people to get as excited as I find, because I find that so stupid. So stupid to be at the top of a staircase as well on roller skate, and it's just stupid. I mean, there's nothing clever about it. But and that for me was the start point, and the title Mr. Swallow the musical. So when the Dot had said, well, if you're going back, just think big, and so I sort of thought kind of 5 or 6 ideas, which all had very silly but big titles, like Mr. Swallow the musical.
Yes,
and that for me. not necessarily for the audience. I had to then sort of write it, and then the Dracula idea kind of came second after that. But for me, the idea of if he's putting on a musical, that'll be fun, right? It's sort of like, well, that's the joke, isn't it? The joke is the title of the show. Mr. Swallow in a musical. That's silly.
So when you say that the doc told you to think big, is that Simon?
Yeah. So Simon. So we met, and we met ages ago. Like we met 2 years ago, maybe a bit longer. Like to talk about the next kind of Swallow thing. And there was a few ideas. There was, some of them were I kind of ended up sort of trying to plonk them all into Dracula. Like one was to do Dracula or do Jekyll and Hyde, kind of relatively not straight, but just do the story and not have the fourth wall, and not have the kind of and it's a rehearsal as well, not have that kind of noises offy kind of thing going on. And then one of them was like Mr. Swallow Jurassic Park, like it was like a Walking with Dinosaurs, kind of with like an animatronic dinosaur. I can't remember some of the others, but they were just scaled up ideas. And I knew that I was going to be in the Queen Dome, so I was like, well, thinking the route, like think, and then actually it was just Mr. Swallow the musical, that's it. And then it was like, because I think I also thought a horror show would be quite good, because I found the idea of Mr. Swallow being scared by something himself that he's created. I found that quite funny as an idea. And then it all kind of sort of became, and we were going to maybe do the story of Jesus, and then I sort of thought Book of Mormon and all that. I just sort of thought maybe, and so so Dracula just sort of then kind of became the thing really, as to what it should be. And it took ages to write, because I wrote a really long script first without any music. Well, I knew where the songs were going to, but without lyrics. Okay. And I mean, that in itself, and I did a couple of read-throughs of it, was like an hour and 20 minutes. And so it just got sort of whittled down again and again and again, and then collaborated with composer Ollie Birch, who's brilliant, and a brilliant comic, and he knew the character very well. Okay. But yeah.
So talking about the character then, the genesis of Mr. Swallow, because I will spend a bit of time on this, because I want to know how much of you is there in his madness. And I also let's stay with that for a moment, because obviously, like for me, I feel like I've probably we've worked together. I've done warm up on TV shows you've been in, sort of a little bit, but I feel like when I look at you, I sort of see Mr. Swallow, because I have spent more time with him.
Mr. Swallow.
Yeah.
It's probably a question for other people, isn't it? It's probably a question for my friends. I don't know. I think I think I like the idea. Like I often think a lot of, and I'm sure everyone has this. It's not like a me thing or even a comedian thing. Is that people always think, what's the worst thing that could happen now, or be said now, or what would be, And if you just sort of see just something funny and situate, and then for me, the character of Miss Swallow is just vocalising that. And just sort of
so just explain that again, because that sounds fascinating.
So I think in anything, just sort of thinking what would be the worst thing, or the most inappropriate, or the silliest, or just the most sort of ridiculous sort of pernickety point to just suddenly ask or to explore at this point. And I sometimes, and I will think that in real life, I will think sometimes that if if I'm at the supermarket and I see, I'm not thinking of anything funny.
Sure.
But if I'm in the supermarket and I see sausages or something, and I'll just sort of think, if I just sort of pushed everything down, like, I don't know, and then in my head it's like Mrs. Swallow is the part of me that would do that, like
yes, okay,
and who would say something, or would kind of goad someone, or not in a mean way, because he's not mean, because it comes from a good place, I think, ultimately. So I think there's a little bit of me, but it is based on a teacher, like it is based on someone real, and I've slightly exaggerated, obviously, their traits for, to make it better, I suppose, to make it more interesting. But it is, and it has elements of kind of what I sort of think would be the worst thing to do in a situation, which I do think as me, but just wouldn't dare say.
There is something really, I was thinking about what are the principles of Mr. Swallow. It is childishness, but there's something, and I think that's within, there's something that is gloriously unrepressed about him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I love when you would come on stage doing a handspring.
Oh, yeah.
Because why not do a handspring as you jump onto the stage?
Energy. I think there's no bound, and I quite like the idea of being that energetic. I mean, I'm not that energetic in real life, but I like the idea of, being that in your face and not backing down. I think that's the thing. And I think earlier on, I was so nervous just about doing character. I mean, character comedy is obviously kind of huge now, even on the circuit. You know, there's lots of character comedy gigs. Well, I think like when we sort of started out, like in like 2005, there weren't like that many kind of character sketch nights.
Yes.
And so I was sort of doing gigs in like stand-up nights and was thinking, geez, how is this going to kind of fare? And there were some places where stuff would do, like Ginglick and stuff like that, you know, would you would kind of do better. But other times I was like petrified, and I kind of almost wouldn't dare kind of prolong like a Mr. Swallow set for any longer than like necessary. I'd be looking for the quickest way to kind of get in and out of a character, because of the nature of the environment, maybe. But then I think as my sort of confidence grew, and maybe, definitely with doing more Edinburghs and things like that, part of the joke was almost that first Swallow hour in 2010 it was, and Mr. Swallow had been in all the previous shows, was just like, how am I going to make people bear this for an hour?
Yes.
And that became part of the joke, was like, kind of, can you believe that I am going to be on stage
being this
speaking like this,
squeaking
and shouting at you and going nuts for an hour? And I know other comedians who came to see that show in particular who had been one round by the end, which I always felt that's the sign of that's good. I'd rather start off than not liking and then win the round, rather than being on board definitely the other way around. But even if they're on board at the start, I mean, because you have to really work for it then, it's quite nice to kind of think people are like, oh, okay, and then like it by the end. But I remember I think it was Dan Tetzel texted Margaret, his wife, and I knew Margaret more than Dan at the time, and I think he texted us like, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to bear another like 55 minutes of this or something. But yeah, but I like it. I like that it tests people a bit. But I don't think it does now. I think people kind of accept it now, and it's become broader now. Like it's become more just, or maybe I've just grown more comfortable with sort of just being very relaxed in that character.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting to try and follow how it's developed, because I feel like, having seen it sort of once a year, I think I've seen all the Mr. Swallow hours.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard for me. It's like growing up with someone. You sort of forget what they were like as a child a little bit, you know. So I'd be interested in just hearing a bit more about the changes that have occurred in him. I think something that the Guardian interview you did touched on was the fact that he isn't. He's not defined. You can't really sum him up in a sentence. You can't say he's this sort of person. Like his job, for example, is he's a kind of a lecturer. He does
why is he now?
You know,
why is he now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
starting a musical.
But it doesn't matter because he's so rich. So have any of those principles changed, or what?
No,
what are the things that have changed along the way?
I think because it is based on a truth, or at least something. As long as I know that it's based on a truth, I've always felt, okay, I can justify this character in my head and only hope that kind of comes across to an audience. But because it is grounded in this real person who just had this attitude problem.
Do they know, by the way? Have you ever?
No, she. I mean, and I should say, the reason why it's so camp is because it's based on a woman.
Okay.
And because there's no innuendo in the show, there's never has been. Yeah. It's never been sexy. Is that the word?
Maybe that's think big for next year.
Maybe I'll do a sex show. For me, it's just because I'm playing a woman, so it's just, for me, it's an outrageous woman at that, but it's an androgynous kind of asexual kind of creation. But yeah, for me, she said, so she was a teacher. I mean, I don't know if she's passed away, but I don't know. But so maybe she. I don't think she knows at all, because she left when I was still doing GCSE, but I'd been taught by her from like year 7, and I used to like impersonate her at school, and she used the lessons as just a platform to just spout outrageous views, nonsense. I mean, we did and she was always going on about like English language, and we're like maybe like preparing for our GCSEs, and she's like, right, we're going to do a debate, and it's like, well, that's not on the syllabus. like we're going to be a Merchant of Venice, and she's like, right, no debate, and we did debates like for like 7 or 8 weeks, and she was really into capital punishment.
Okay,
she really believed that people should be put to death if they committed a crime, and like the first lesson, the first sort of our foray into like debating about capital punishment, like we sat down, she's like, right, and she just handed out these A3 massive pictures of Myra Hindley's face, and like we were like 14, 15, and we're like, geez. And anyone who disagreed with her, you know, anyone who said, well, I don't know if it's going to solve the problem really, kind of putting people to death, look at America, all these kind of like very sensible things to suggest. She was like, she lured them children to their death. I mean, it was really dark. I mean, she was ferocious. I mean, and like she would, and you know, even then when we were doing Merchant of Venice, and I did a set that was about this, specifically this one lesson, where we were meant to be going through the play and you know, allegedly she was going to allocate parts to everyone and would like read it as a group. And she was like, right, who wants to play Bassanio? I'll do that then. Who wants to play Solario? I'll do that. And she didn't look up. She never would look up to see if anyone had volunteered. And she ended up reading the whole play, playing all the parts in her own voice all the way through.
With not changing the voices?
Not changing the voices. Yeah, she would. I think she'd maybe say when she's like, Bassanio, in sooth I know not why I am sad. Solario, why are you sad? Bassanio. I mean, it was just, I mean, it was just... I mean, she was sort of formidable. But yeah, I mean, that was obviously a starting point. And so for me, the attitude as if like, I mean, I feel that he kind of always acts as if he's just been heckled. He's always got this kind of like, what? Like, it's this kind of, this is incredulity of like, I can't believe what you've just said to me. Of kind of, even a really everyday, normal thing that someone says, like, why are you asking me that? Like, what? He's found some really... thing that's for him to be pedantic about. It's like everyone's having a go at him, but no one is.
Yes.
He's having a go at everyone else.
Hence the frustration with everyday things such as bananas, or like the concept of infinity. It pisses me off.
Like, I mean, you just don't get anything. And it's that famous kind of thing of that, you know, that hopefully, you know, if I got a TV show with Swallow, like, hopefully it would just fall into that thing of, it's the character who wants to be in control or wants to be in a position of responsibility, which that's always been a running theme, that he's always been in a position of somewhat more powerful or authoritarian, but he's just rubbish at it. He's just so bad at it, and that's just that is the base joke, is that he wants this kind of power control, but he's rubbish.
It's always nice to perform in a venue that looks and feels like a really oversubscribed one of those puzzle room escape games.